Hello and welcome to Cyberside Chats. My name is Sherri Davidoff. I'm the founder of LMG Security, and I'm so excited to have Tom Pohl on here today. He is our director of penetration testing. Tom, how's the hacking going?
Hacking's going good. We're having a fun time this time of the year.
I know you are because you were just telling me how you totally took over a bank using their own security tools against them. And I was like, we have to have you on for Cyberside Chats to tell you about this. And as we were talking, I realized that this happens frequently because security tools have so much access throughout your network. And of course, penetration testers and hackers alike want to take advantage of it. So why don't we dive in? Tell us how you totally took over this bank.
Well, first, I want to give credit where credit's due. This is an internal penetration test that's being run by one of my coworkers, Parker, who is absolutely brilliant. I love all of Parker's work. But yeah, so what we were doing was we're conducting what's called an internal penetration test, where we put a computer on the inside of this bank's network, just like as if it's plugged into a conference room. In fact, sometimes they will just plug it into a conference room for us, and then we go from there.
So you have no account, you have no credentials, you don't even have like a login or anything. It's literally just a
No.
random computer that you've just plugged into the wall. The equivalent of that, correct?
Equivalent of that, yeah. And we'll get an IP address, right?
And
And
that's
that's about it. That's it. And then our goal is to assess the network, and we meet with a client and we talk about what's important to them, what are their crown jewels, so that we can put all the issues in context with what's important to their business.
So Parker
And so
starts and you have access to the network and you run it overnight, correct?
Yeah, so after day one of testing, he leaves the listener listening, right? Because sometimes there's things that happen, and things that bump in your network at late at night, and it's sometimes good to listen for those. And sure enough, that first night when he was just listening to the network, uh, a network vulnerability scanner scanned the computer that we had on the network, and it even tried to log into us.
So this was a
Uh,
popular one, like Rapid7 actually scanned you and tried to log in. Why would it try to log into your computer?
Yeah, so it was Rapid7, and so what happens is Rapid7 and most of these vulnerability scanners, they will discover like new assets. They'll look at everything and say, and then they're often given like really high level access where they can log into every computer so that they can look at the software that's installed, look at the way things are configured, and actually then kind of do an inventory and looking for vulnerabilities on every domain joined computer in the organization. Well, the trick is that we're not a normal computer on the network. We're
Yeah,
an
we're not
evil
one of their
attacker.
corporate computers, so they can't log into us.
Yeah, they can't, but they can. We can also abuse that attempted login against them.
So
Uh,
wait. You can let them try, and let me guess, you're going to try to catch whatever credentials they're using to log in somehow?
Well, sort of. Actually, we do a little bit different than that. So, this bank has been doing penetration testing for a long time, and they've fixed a lot of things. Um, and what was interesting is that almost every server on their network had what's called SMB signing enabled and enforced, where basically you couldn't monkey around with being a man in the middle and things like that. But we found a few hosts that could. And so what we did was we convinced. So we waited, and on the second night, we set up a trap for the Rapid7 scanner, assuming that it was going to come back and scan us again. And we set up a trap and by the way, this is part of their continuous vulnerability scanning product, that we set up the trap so that when they tried to log into us, we could relay that authentication and basically get the Rapid7 scanner to log into a remote server for us,
Oh, so
because
you were the man in the middle.
we were the
So the
man in the middle.
Rapid7
Yeah.
scanner tried to log into you, and you were like, "Oh, we'll just pass that along to this other computer."
Yeah. So
And you were watching
exactly.
everything. Is that right?
Yeah, so Rapid7 connects to us. So then we connect to one of these unsigned hosts. They give us a challenge. We send that challenge back to Rapid7. Rapid7 gladly signs that challenge, sends it back to us, and then at that point, we're logged in to the remote server.
And did
And
Rapid7 have domain admin credentials then?
It did. And so we got admin credentials or admin access to this remote server.
So that
This
must be
wasn't a
pretty common for vulnerability scanners or security tools, right? Because they're running with admin because they have to do so much.
Yeah, because they have to do so much, they're often given really high level of access, and so, in this particular case, I don't know that a Rapid7 can do this. I know other vulnerability scanners do, but they didn't require client signing. Whereas basically the person that's logging in can require, say, hey, you need to only authenticate with, I need you to do SMB signing with me. Because often if SMB signing's not required, it may be enabled but not enforced. That's like the default, and that's why we found
Mm.
it on a few servers because that was the default. But if the client says no, you have to do SMB signing, then SMB signing goes. But for some reason, this Rapid7 tool is not configured to work that way, and so then we could say, oh, we could basically be man in the middle to any server that didn't require the signing.
So let's talk about what SMB signing is because I see this on vulnerability scan results all the time. It's usually like low criticality, and people are like, yeah, there's a low criticality vulnerability. And then I see you get domain admin with it frequently. So I assume
Yeah.
that we're using the SMB protocol, correct?
Yep, that's right. Yeah, and so we're using an SMB protocol, and most network scanners don't show it as a very high critical vulnerability, but in context with the way that we could use it, it's super important that
Right.
that be fixed. And
Well,
and because
and the
go ahead.
signing piece means that you're verifying that that computer is a trusted computer. So if you don't have SMB signing turned on, that means you can't trust the computer that you're trying to log into. And that's exactly what you guys took advantage of. You're an imposter, and there's no way for Rapid7's vulnerability scanner to tell the difference if they're not checking, correct?
That's exactly right. Yeah, had their scanner said, "Oh no, I want to do client signing," and the server has to do SMB signing with me, then it wouldn't have worked. But
Right.
because it's permissive and says, "Oh, you don't support signing? Cool, I don't need that," and then that's what actually makes them vulnerable.
Okay, so Rapid7 tries to log into you. You turn around and do this man in the middle attack. What system did you log into?
So it was actually kind of a lower privilege server. It didn't do very much. I think it was maybe it did something around some printer. We found a lot of drivers on the computer for printers. But the biggest important thing is that we were able to steal the machine account that we logged into. So basically, once they had EDR in place that stopped some of our attempts, but we were able to get the NTLM hash or the basically the password hash for the computer that we were logged into.
Mm.
And why that's important is because that's an actual domain account. And with that domain account, we can then use a technique called pass the hash and actually start logging into all the other resources on the network as if we were that computer.
Oh my gosh. So you've gone from zero to being a computer on the network that is domain joined, and now you can spelunk around. Then what?
Yeah. So then we start looking, we actually, one of the things that we enumerated was Active Directory certificate services. It's kind of funny because we just like enumerated it, but didn't look at the results. We started looking around at like other files, and we were looking at the access, and like there were scripts and things that we found on the network that had passwords in them, but they were all old. None of them worked anymore. But, so we wasted a little bit of time like that. But then Parker came around and looked at the Active Directory certificate services and discovered, aha, there's actually a misconfiguration in one of their templates, where basically it's the work order, if you will, for issuing a new certificate. And I should probably tell you what Active Directory certificate services is, right? It's basically your certificate authority, kind of like, if you've ever bought a certificate authority for a website or a TLS certificate for a website, it's the people who sign the certificate, like GoDaddy or VeriSign or whoever, Let's Encrypt.
Right. But you can run your
You
own. You don't have to
you
pay
can
for
run your
them.
own. Yeah, yeah. So you can run your own on your own internal network, and so that's what we were. That's what we found the misconfiguration in. So they're running their own certificate authority, and they had a template that allowed us to issue a certificate for anybody on the network. And
Huh.
so we went ahead and issued a certificate for the Rapid7 scanner, who was a domain administrator, and then it actually is really interesting. Their network was configured in a way that we couldn't. Normally, we will try to get the NTLM hash for that user that we forged the certificate for, and then do pass the hash, but it didn't work. So, but what we were able to do was drop into an LDAP shell, an administrative LDAP shell, and then we created our own domain administrator account. Right. So now we created our own LMG domain admin account. And then at that point, we went to
Game
the domain.
over.
Yeah, we
Boom.
went to the domain controller and dumped everybody's passwords, and so we could take them offline and crack them and make sure that they've got good passwords and things. Uh, yeah, it took a couple days, but yeah, it was a great exercise in using security tools against an organization.
Right. And I know it's hard to break into a bank these days. I mean, most of them have been doing pen testing for many, many years, correct?
Yeah, yeah. This bank
Nice
certainly
work,
has.
Parker.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah.
So okay, so you've leveraged the vulnerability scanner to gain domain admin. Now we have our own LMG domain admin account. How common is this? Are there other cases where you use security tools against an organization?
Yeah, I love telling the story because another one of my coworkers, Derek, there was another bank, a very really large bank, and then I remember when we met with them initially, they're like, "Yeah, we've been doing pen testing for about 18 years. No pen test company's gotten domain admin on us in at least 4 years, and now we've
Challenge
employed this new
accepted.
security tool called." Pentera, and where they're like, it's supposed to find and fix all the vulnerabilities that we haven't found ourselves yet, and they're like, so you guys are going to come in, but you're not going to find anything, and we're like, okay, challenge accepted, and 2.5 hours into the engagement, Derek was able to completely compromise the entire organization and create his own, and dump the domain controller. And in fact, it was ironic because we went ahead and when we dumped the domain controller, we used the Pentera account to do so because it was a highly privileged account, right? So
Right.
it didn't find the vulnerabilities that we were leveraging, and we went ahead and used the highly privileged Pentera account against them. It's
So,
funny.
there were two issues here, really. It gave, I think, the client a false sense of security, thinking everything had been configured properly. And then, because that account was so highly privileged and organization wide, you were then able to use it to engage in a full domain admin takeover.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
It's funny. We just compiled a list of all the vulnerabilities we've found on 2025's pen tests, and it was interesting to note that 68% of the vulnerabilities that we reported to customers never showed up on a vulnerability scanner.
yeah, and that's a sneak peek. We're going to release that soon, but sneak peek. Okay, so I know you guys also leverage things like backup platforms and stuff like that. You want to give us a little summary of that?
Yeah, so anything that has highly privileged access in your environment is potentially vulnerable, right? Veeam. Veeam is often a domain administrator account on your network. Whereas, so that if I can gain access to your Veeam account, then I can have, basically wreak havoc on your entire network. And there's been very common vulnerabilities and misconfigurations in Veeam over the years that we've been able to leverage in order to compromise organizations as well. So it's not just security products. I'm an equal opportunity abuser. That anytime something's got high privilege access in your network, I'm going to try to abuse it and use it against you, just like an attacker would.
Very nice. All right. So, what can we learn from this? Number one, your security tools are among the most attractive targets on your network because you gave them the keys, you gave them the access. Things like scanners, backup, EDR, even breach simulation platforms often hold domain admin and can reach every host. So, it's important to inventory those privileged service accounts and know exactly what each one can reach.
Right. And low or informational findings are the pivot. Missing SMB signing is the classic example. It barely rates in the report, and it's a hinge to the whole bank compromise turned on. Enforcing SMB signing is super important, not just from the server side, but from the client side as well.
Yeah, don't ignore those lower informational findings. Sometimes they're the stepping stone for an attacker to take over. Check how your scanner authenticates, not just what it finds. Credential scanning that authenticates to untrusted or unknown hosts, that's a risk to your organization if it doesn't use signing or mutual authentication, or if it's going to hand out privileged authentication to whatever answers. So ask your vendor how to enforce this and verify the settings.
Also, audit your Active Directory certificate services templates in particular. A single over permissive template turns into issue myself a certificate any user for any user in the company, which turns into domain admin. Most organizations have never even looked.
Yeah, and finally, least privilege applies to your security tools. And often that's where the principle of least privilege gets skipped. Or look at things like just in time authentication if you can. Because again, it holds the keys to the kingdom, and you want to make sure you understand how it's being used and limit it appropriately. All right, Tom. Well, I know you need to get back to hacking. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us a little window into your world today. Really appreciate it.
It's good to see you. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, and thanks everybody for tuning in. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week on Cyberside Chats.